Hey guys, this is Juan Jaramillo, team lead of Empower Homes, and today we're going to be talking about avoiding red flags. So I kind of broke it down into four different things: financial red flags, contract and offer red flags, property related red flags, and then seller specific red flags. Let's start with the financial red flags. Income that doesn't qualify for DTI. This is one of the most common red flags that can occur. So, if you have a client and you're meeting with them, specifically a buyer, or even if, let's say, a buyer's reaching out to you to submit an offer on one of your listings, if they mention they've done a lot of overtime, that could be a red flag because overtime is one of those incomes that could qualify or could help you to get your DTI towards your DTI, but it depends on how frequently and how consistent they've been doing that for the last 2 years. So a lot of the time, the lenders will take the average of the last 2 years overtime, and then that's how they would go and qualify that income. Because overtime, for the most part, is not guaranteed, and so keep a note of that. Definitely keep that in mind when getting your buyer or getting a buyer's offer. Um, Make sure that you're aware of that. Okay, co-signed loans count against you. The amount of times I've met with buyers that co-signed a car loan uh, for one of their parents, or usually it's the parents doing it for the brother or sister, or you're doing it for a family member. That counts against you 100%. Now, is there a way to kind of get around it? Yes. Usually, what they ask for is 12 months of payment of proof that you're not the one paying that car, that it's your brother or whoever is paying that car. However, keep this in mind: is it has to be the other recipient or the other owner of the car that's paying. So we had a case once where the client was co-signed on the loan. However, the person on the loan wasn't the one paying for it. It was the husband or the boyfriend paying for the car. The underwriter did not accept that because there is nothing to guarantee that the boyfriend will continue to pay that off. And so that's a risk that the bank wasn't willing to take for that debt. So that counted against the DTI, and it makes it a lot harder to qualify for the home you're trying to qualify for. Cash must be seasoned in a bank account, not under the mattress. So usually the lender will ask, or the bank will ask, for the last 2 months of bank statements. So you want to make sure that the cash is in a bank account for at least 2 months, if not obviously longer. Banks do not like cash. They do not like cash. You cannot use that cash in a transaction. Now, if you're trying to buy a home um, completely cash, most attorneys don't accept cash. And really, I haven't really found a way to work around that. They just gonna have to put it into a bank account. No, I don't really know how they do that. I don't know what the right way is. So talk to a CPA, talk to an accountant, talk to an attorney on making sure that making sure how what's the best way to go about that. But obviously it's always legitimate cash. These are business owners that just have high cash businesses, and so that can happen. So keep that in mind. Cash needs to be seasoned in the bank account in order for it to be used. Now, the next one is the pre-qualification is not the same thing as a pre-approval. There is a big difference. The big difference is in a pre-qualification, the lender does not verify income. The pre-approval, the lender does verify income. That's a huge difference because most of the problems, in my experience, has been DTI related, as if for if somebody's able to qualify or not. It's either one of the co-signed loans that affects that affects the DTI, or some kind of debt or lien that they didn't know about upfront that affects the DTI. But a big one is an income related DTI. They thought they could use some kind of income that they no longer are able to use, and that makes a big difference as to how much they can qualify for. And if your contract to close at that point, that's a tough conversation. That's kind of how you get those stories where you thought you would just need 10K to close, but now you need a $20,000 down payment to close. That's how you get those stories all the time. So those are red flags, financial red flags to look out for. Next one, contract and offer red flags. So this is kind of like tailoring towards the seller side a little bit. If you're receiving an offer, if you have a ridiculously high offer, which used to happen in 2020, 2021, doesn't really happen too often now, but still something to keep in mind of. and there is an appraisal contingency, it's as good as another offer that is at asking price or at least closer to value. That appraisal, it's not going to appraise if it's a ridiculously, like, it's $60,000 over value, over asking price. It's not going That's not going to appraise. So make sure that you make your seller aware of that risk and try to get the appraisal contingency off if you can, or just set the expectation that, hey, this might not appraise. All right, high offer but asking for big closing cost credits. So this is kind of tailored towards the first one, and here's how. If you're asking for 250 and you get an offer for 260 because they need $10,000 in closing costs, that's a risk. Now, it's not as high of a risk as the first bullet point in my belief. However, it's still a risk that happens because you think that the home is worth 250. If the appraisal believes that the home is worth 250, there's a 10K gap now. And so it's just a risk that you should be aware of when you're accepting a high closing cost amount. Long due diligence period with low termination fees. Those are extremely common with investors or sometimes with land also. And it's something to be aware of, especially if you're on the receiving end of the offer. That is, for me, it's a red flag, because you don't have much skin in the game. You have a long due diligence for some reason. That screams, the wholesalers used to do this all the time. That screams a red flag to me. Not non-committal. You get the home off the market, but there's not much for them to lose. So don't really love receiving offers like that. So keep an eye out for those. Property related red flags. So confusion between real property versus personal property. So one of the things that when I first joined the business is I always forgot to mention, or I didn't forget to mention, but you don't think to mention, um, unless your client asks, if the fridge is going to stay, the washer dryer is going to stay, the blinds or those going to stay. And so you forget what is technically real property or personal property, or maybe you don't forget, but you forget to set the proper expectation with the client. And so I remember once it happened where the client bought the home. She moved in. She looked at I think it was the final walkthrough of the home, and there was no fridge, and she freaked out because she was expecting a fridge. Now that sucks because that's an extra $700 expense that you weren't expecting, right? And so, as an agent, you want to set those proper expectations, and we definitely learn from our mistakes, and that's why I wanted to kind of bring it up here. All right, next one: restrictions even when no HOA. This one's pretty. It's more common when a home is within city limits. It's not super common when homes are outside of city limits, but definitely something to bring awareness to. It's not just there is no restrictions, or if there's not an HOA or maybe a neighborhood that has no HOA, it doesn't mean that there's zero restrictions. So definitely, ask the seller and kind of dig around a little bit. You can actually reach out to the county directly to see what kind of restrictions that area might have. FHA versus VA loans may flag issues like deteriorating sheds or storage buildings. This was a pretty big one and quite annoying. So you find the perfect home under 200, um, with a shed. The home itself can qualify for FHA because it's not terrible, but the shed is dying. Like, you can see it falling apart. Yeah, the FHA VA loans aren't going to touch that. Like, it's better for the seller just to go ahead and tear that shelter up and pretend it never existed. Be careful with those sheds and keep an eye on those sheds and set the proper expectation. Now, it's not saying that you can't qualify for a FHA or a VA loan. What you have to do is, while you're negotiating, set the proper expectation with the sellers, saying, "Hey, I see that X, Y, and Z isn't going to qualify for an FHA appraisal. Would you be open to doing whatever it takes in order for it to qualify?" You set the expectation up front. All of a sudden, contract to close ratio is going to be much better, and it's going to be a lot less stressful. Because going on out of contract, especially when the buyer still wants the home and the seller still wants to sell it, that just sucks. It's a lose lose. So get ahead of the game, stay ahead of the game, and make sure you set those proper expectations. Keep an eye out for these red flags that will occur in your career. All right, seller side red flags. CL 100 contingency could delay or kill a deal. Now, CL 100s are extremely common. 9 out of 10 contracts are going to have it because the lender most of the time requires it, especially FHA, VA. And I mean, why wouldn't you want a termite contingency? Now, this is specifically for maybe a seller that's looking to sell their home to an investor, looking to sell a home that's not in great condition. And so, for those kind of homes that need to be completely renovated anyway, and you're asking for an as is contract, make sure that this CL 100 contingency is not checked. Or if it is, be aware of it and know you will still be responsible and are expected to make sure that the CL 100 passes. So, this is an important one to keep an eye out, specifically for those who are selling a home that are not in great condition. Be prepared for repair requests tied to inspections. So on this one, you want to set the proper expectations for sellers that the buyer will ask for things, even if you think the home, or maybe not even think, maybe even if you know the home is in pristine condition, the buyers are going to ask for things. So be ready for that. It doesn't mean that they don't want the home. It doesn't mean that they hate your home. It's just they're trying to negotiate. They're trying to get the best possible deal. Just like as a seller, you're trying to get the best possible deal for yourself. So keep that in mind. One good thing I like to do is sometimes reach out to the inspector and see what they think, or reach out to a good trusted contractor and see what they thought about what they're asking for, and get a quote and whatnot. But yeah, so just be ready for that. Go ahead and set that expectation to your sellers. Manage expectations early to avoid surprises later. That is 100% the thing. Like if you haven't talked to your client about the due diligence period 3 or 4 times before you ever get to the due diligence period, then you're not managing expectations early enough, and there's going to be something that comes up into the due diligence period, and it's not going to go well. And it's this game, guys, is all about managing expectations. It's also all about avoiding red flags. As you gain more experience, and it's going to be the same for me. I've only been in this game for about 6 years to 7 years. As we gain more experience, we'll know how to manage proper expectations earlier and earlier and earlier in the process to help benefit our clients and give just that much more of a world-class experience. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys got some nuggets, got some good whatever. I don't really know what I'm thinking, but I appreciate you guys looking at it. And if you guys are in the upstate area and are interested in partnering with me, grabbing a coffee, feel free to reach out. And for everybody else, if you guys have any questions about Real Broker, let me know. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye now.